this charge as well. Also joining me here on the show this afternoon, the host of The Fix here on ENCA and political analyst, of course. Always a pleasure having you with us, Karima Brown. Good to have you with us. We're discussing a painting, but there's a lot more than an 8 million rand painting at stake, isn't there?
Absolutely, Gareth. I think the key issue is the point that the reporter Maseko made when former Premier Ace Magashule vacated his office to take up the position as one of the most powerful people in the governing party, Secretary General. What belonged to the state needed to remain there. Now we know, of course, that that was not the case. So the 42-year-old man that is going to be appearing on the 4th of March, what I have been able to find out is that the NPA is likely to ask that the matter be moved to the High Court. And that gives us an indication that this is quite a serious matter. So it's much more than a painting. And it also has emerged that Mr. Magashule is, in fact, a person of interest in this case, simply because it involved him at that period. He was the outgoing premier. It's his security personnel that removed the painting. And of course now a 42-year-old man said to be linked to Mr. Magashule in quite a direct way, in the sense that he was an employee attached to the Premier's office, either in the form of being a driver or the security detail of the former Premier. So it puts Mr. Magashule centre and front of this investigation, because that painting was removed on someone's instruction, and we will have to find out through the court process who instructed the person who removed the painting from the wall. And Mr. Magashule will have to account whether it was done on his instruction.
And if it was done on his instruction, I can't imagine this looks very good for the man who's now very much an influential figure within the ANC. If he is making that kind of instruction that something that belongs to the state be physically removed from the office he's working in by a member of his employ, if that is the accusation that it is to be true, this doesn't look good for someone like him who's meant to uphold the status of the state.
No, absolutely. And look, Mr. Magashule is no stranger to controversy, Gareth. The painting is the latest in a string of allegations that has been made involving Mr. Magashule. As you know, the Estina dairy case that is being retried by the NPA stems from a deal that was concluded between the office of the Premier, which coincides with Magashule's term as Premier of the Free State, and the company in India. There has also been very damaging allegations made against Mr. Magashule at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, which is still sitting and whose life has been extended. And that includes a range of allegations linking him to bribing scandals, to allegations of corruption and wrongdoing. So Mr. Magashule is certainly featuring very large in the state capture investigations, both at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, but also what one would assume would be investigations of a criminal nature by the Hawks and, of course, by the NPA. And
this is what I think many people are going to start asking, especially if everything you've just cited, the bribery, the corruption, Estina, the Zondo inquiry. Some people, some critics of this might turn around and say, it's all about a painting. What does this really have to do with Ace Magashule in a bigger picture? Surely this can't be that important when you weigh it up against everything you just said.
You know, the important thing here is that we've seen state capture on a massive scale, and we've seen it described as being more than just corruption. We've seen it described as akin to a silent coup, and that's why we actually have the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. So this is, corruption with a particular aim. It was initiated to replace constitutional structures, to hollow out state institutions, from Eskom to the Hawks to the police itself. It targeted very, very important institutions in our country, such as the South African Revenue Services, that is still struggling, for example, now to collect revenue to be able to provide goods and services for South Africa. So one has to locate the theft of this painting and the fact that it's now gone to court within that broader context. Moreover, Gareth, you would have seen from today, earlier on this very channel, you had Carl Niehaus drumming up support for former President Jacob Zuma, who was, of course, the president at the time of the state capture years, and later addressing a press conference saying that they're going to come out in their thousands to support him. And the important thing here is that those involved in state capture through various allegations that are being tested in front of the Zondo Commission, in front of courts of law, know that if a warrant of arrest can be issued for the man that used to be the most powerful person in South Africa, it means that they too are no longer safe. So that, for me, is the big takeout of the fact that the Hawks has now gone on record saying that Ace Magashule's, a person is going to be charged and is going to appear in court. And the fact that this person is linked to the former premier tells you that the NPA is systematically going about doing its work. It can't be seen to be acting politically. No. Tomorrow is SONA, for goodness sake. So it has to proceed very carefully, and it has to make sure that it has all the facts, and it does so on the basis of the facts. So it's a very significant development as far as I'm concerned.
Karima Brown, I'm sure it is, and I'm sure we're going to unpack this as we start heading into SONA as well. Karima Brown, host of The Fix and political analyst, as always, thank you for coming in to speak to us.